So in this chapter, we're going to talk about money, about some theory about money, what money is for, and how money supply will affect interest rate, and also how it affects exchange rate. So at the end of the day, we're going to try to we'll try to understand how government monetary policy is going to affect the exchange rate. Okay, so that is what we want to do. This is one of the most important building blocks of our model. How government money supply, how government monetary policy will affect exchange rate. And when it affects exchange rate, it will also affect other things such as interest rate, okay, and also the price level and things like that. And we're going to distinguish between the short run and the long run, okay. So there's this is a very rich chapter, a lot of new things. So you better pay attention to learn the new things. So as you see, we're going to have to, together with the slides, we're going to have to look at some additional notes that I posted on Canvas. Okay, so we're going to cover a little bit of that. So the objective is we describe and discuss the national money markets. Okay, we're going to talk about money market, show how monetary policy and interest rates fit into foreign exchange market. And then we distinguish between the economy's long-run position and the short run. Okay, so the distinction, okay, between short run and long run is that in the short run, the general price level is fixed, whereas in the long run, we allow the price level to move. Okay, how the price level and exchange rate will change in the long run. Okay, so this is short run and long run is distinguished between them, and then outline. So and then finally we'll outline the relationship between the short run and long run effects of monetary policy. So monetary policy will have a short run effect and a long run effect. So there's a long run adjustment. Okay, and then we're going to finally, very interestingly, we'll going to talk about something called the concept of overshooting. Okay, that explains why overshooting of exchange rate explains why exchange rate is very volatile, much more volatile than the price level. The price level is more sticky. Okay, so the price level, the general price level doesn't fluctuate that much, but the exchange rate actually fluctuates a lot. Okay, you can explain why using our theory. Why? So we also will have to study two other sets of notes. In fact, the first set of notes is just more or less a summary of the second one. The first set is a notes that summarizes the second. The second one is basically some is an extract from a certain book written by Gregory Mankiw. So we're going to talk about a little bit of that. So, so first of all, we have to talk about what is money, and who controls the supply of money, and then we talk about the willingness to hold money, and so on. We are going to build a model of money demand. Okay, we're going to build a model of money demand, and from there we look at the money market. So what is the money market? The money market is is the market where the supply and demand will interact. to determine the interest rate, basically. Okay, that's where the money market is, so the money market will determine the interest rate, and money supply is to control by the government, right? So when money supply changes, it will affect the interest rate. Okay. So it's a very complicated model, actually. So before I start, let me ask you, what do you think is money? It's a hard question, and it's also a simple question. Yeah.
It's a very liquid asset.
Money is a liquid asset.
To transform, like to value stuff, to transform it in buying something, give value to stuff.
Okay, so you say it's a value, it's a liquid asset. Okay, and what else?
To buy stuff and like a way of exchanging without.
It's a medium of exchange. Right? It's a medium. Okay. So he said liquid. It's a liquid asset. So you emphasize the liquidity aspect of money, as opposed to non-money. Okay. So you're saying, okay, you're trying to say, okay, so if we divide assets into two types, one is monetary asset and the other is non-monetary asset, then you're saying that money has the characteristic of being liquid, rather than non-money being less liquid. So can you tell me any example of non-monetary assets? Property, yeah, good. What else? Bonds, yes. What else? There are lots of assets out there. Yeah, stocks. Yeah. Okay. All right. And foreign currency. We studied last time, right? Foreign currency is a kind of asset. So, yeah. So there are all these assets out there, and you just told me what are the non-monetary assets. These non-monetary assets, why do we say they are less liquid? Well, they are. You cannot use these non-monetary assets for payment. That's what he just said. You use it for payment, right? You go and pay using it. It's a medium of exchange, right? Basically, you cannot pay by bonds. Nobody's going to accept your bonds as a means of payment. Nobody's going to accept your property as a means of payment. Okay, even foreign currency asset. Nobody's going to accept. Euro. If you go to the Hong Kong store, you pay euro. Nobody accepts it, right? So it has to be, your own currency. Okay. So it's a medium of exchange. It's a very good point. Medium of exchange is closely related to the concept of liquidity, right? Use it for payment. So it's very important. Liquidity is a very, very important aspect that we wanted to emphasize here. The liquidity of monetary asset is the defining characteristic of money for our purposes. Okay, so but more broadly speaking, what are the functions of money? Do you still remember? All of you must have studied some closed economy macroeconomics, right? So what are the functions of money? Do you still remember? Do you still remember there are three functions of money? Store of value and what? Unit of account and medium of exchange, we just said. Okay, medium of exchange is much related to the liquidity concept, right? Store of value means that it's an asset. It's an asset, okay? So we already said that money is an asset, obviously, right? You can store it for later use, right? Any asset, it's a store of value, and it's a unit of account because it's how the prices are denominated, right? So so these three functions, okay, so we emphasize here the liquidity aspect, the medium of exchange aspect. Okay. And also actually the store of value aspect, because it's also an asset, right? So very good. Liquidity. So used as a means of payment, okay? So money can be defined narrowly or broadly, okay? Because it's liquidity, right? So we have to remember liquidity, we emphasize liquidity as a defining characteristic of money. But liquidity is actually, it's not black and white, okay? It's actually just a gradation, okay? Some asset is more liquid than others, okay? But even within money, there is some money that's more liquid than other money, okay? So, right? So if you have cash, then cash is the most liquid form, right? So you're holding, you know, this cash. That's the most liquid. But there are other something slightly less liquid. So let's say you have money in the savings account. Money in the savings account, it's slightly less liquid than your cash, right? So because you still have to go to the bank to get the cash to pay the other person, right? So slightly less, and then your checking account, right? The account where you can write a check against, that also is slightly less liquid than your cash. So that's why, as a result, there are actually, it's not black and white what exactly is the quantity of money in the economy. So how much is the quantity of money in the economy? You have to, therefore, separate money into different types. Do you still remember? So you have M1, M2, M3, right? So M1 is the most liquid form of money. Okay, M2 includes M1 plus some other form of money that is slightly less liquid than M1. And M3 is all the M2 plus some other form of money which is less liquid than M2, right? So M1, M2, M3, right? So M1 is most liquid. So what are M1? Well, M1 is basically the currency, the checking deposits, and the savings account. Actually, savings account is actually kind of already, I believe that savings account should be M1. I cannot remember exactly. But so all these most liquid form is M1, okay? So by and large, we'll say that we'll say that for our purpose, when we talk about money, we assume it is M1, okay, the most liquid form. Okay, when we talk about money in this book, in this course, we assume that it is M1, the most liquid form. It's the cash, the demand deposit, and the money that and perhaps the money in your savings account that can be easily liquidated. Okay, because nowadays money in your savings account you can also use for payment, right? This is something called EPS, right? So you can use your card to pay. This is called what do you call the card? Can't remember what it is called. It's a debit card. Yeah, debit card is the card where you just pay using that card. So remember, deposit of foreign currency is not money in our sense. As I said, foreign currency cannot be used for payment. people don't accept the foreign currency. Right? They are less liquid, obviously. This is a kind of asset, right? Foreign currency is a kind of asset, but it's not liquid enough. So, as I said, we kind of emphasize the liquidity aspect. For repay of debt without substantial transaction costs. Yeah, so transaction cost is an important thing, right? So the reason why we say certain assets are not liquid is because you have to incur a very high transaction cost in order to liquidate it. To liquidate it into cash, you may incur a very high transaction cost. That's why they call it illiquid. So sometimes liquidity, the reason why certain things is not so liquid is, first of all, it's because of transaction cost. It takes a long time to liquidate it, or take usually it's a matter of time, and also transaction costs, negotiation, whatever, right? You sell a property, you also, when you want to sell a property, you don't want to sell it when the price is low. You have to wait until the price is high, and that also takes time, okay? So liquidity is also related to the fluctuation in price of the asset. Okay. But on the other hand, I think the trade-off here is the following. The trade-off is that is interest rate. Okay, so by holding money, you have the liquidity. You can pay for things. You have the convenience. Okay, but what do you give up? You give up on the interest rate. Okay, so this is the basic trade-off when you hold monetary asset. And the demand for money equation, the demand for money equation, one aspect of it is capturing that trade-off. Okay, okay. So that trade-off is liquidity versus interest rate. Okay, so so that's exactly explains why demand for money depends on the interest rate, okay? The interest rate. So, right, you agree, right? So higher interest rate, the illiquid assets, they don't have liquidity, but then they earn higher interest rate, okay? So here's the trade-off. So we group the assets into monetary asset and non-monetary asset, okay? As I said, the demarcation between the two are actually arbitrary because it's not black and white. It's not that this is absolutely liquid and this is absolutely illiquid. It's that's a gradation of them. But obviously, certain things are on the left-hand side. You have the currency, the most liquid one is the cash, and then gradually checking deposit, debit card, all this kind of thing, deposit, time deposit. Time deposit is not that liquid, right? So it's less liquid than cash, but you can still liquidate it by paying a penalty, I suppose. So you have all these assets. Some of them are. So as I said, we defined monetary asset as M1 in our course. Okay, basically. Just assume that monetary assets is M1. Anything that's not M1 are non-monetary assets, basically. Okay? Just think of it that way. So, right. Okay? So, yeah, that's right. That's exactly what I just said. All right? Okay. So, now, we're going to talk about so first of all, we're going to talk about the money market, right? And the idea is to establish the fact that the money market, in the money market, we will, in the equilibrium, the interest rate is determined. Okay, so this is very important. Okay. So, and the so money supply. So the central bank controls the quantity of money. Okay. This now here we're talking about the modern economy where money is fiat money. Okay. Remember. So this is. Fiat money. Fiat money basically means money that is issued by government fiat, which means that it is it's not some commodity money. It's not some like gold or precious metal, copper. Not that kind of thing. But simply issued by government by government fiat, and people trust the government. You have to trust the government. If you don't trust the government, fiat money doesn't work. So money supply is controlled by the central bank, right? So in the U.S. it's the Federal Reserve System, right? So we're going to talk a little bit more about how the central bank affect the money supply a little bit later. So money demand, okay, represents the amount of monetary asset that people are willing to hold, okay. So as I just said, people hold money just because they want liquidity, okay, and there is a trade-off, right? That's a trade-off. When you hold more money, you actually are giving up the interest rate that you can earn by holding the non-monetary asset. So it's a trade-off, right? So there's an equilibrium. There will be an equilibrium, right? So if let's say you have your $10,000, right? You may not want to hold all $10,000 as cash because let's say depends on your income is $10,000 per month, but then each month you would need to spend half of it. Okay, so you may save the other half. So the other half will be maybe saved as bonds or something. That those will be illiquid asset, and then you need $5,000 for your payments. So that is the liquid asset that you have to keep, right? So for you it's like that. For so basically behind your mind you basically are doing this trade-off, right? You decide how much of your money should be kept, how much of your assets should be kept as money, and how much as an interest-bearing asset. So we're going to talk about the individual demand for money and aggregate demand for money separately. They are related, actually. Okay, I hope maybe this works better. So the individual demand for money and aggregate demand for money are actually related. So so for individuals, okay, you will when you consider the demand for money, you consider, as I said, the trade-off, right? The interest rate. If the interest rate is higher, maybe you're willing to hold less money. You want to actually keep more non-monetary asset because the interest rate is higher. And the second one is risk. Okay, so in your if you buy stocks, okay, there's a lot of risk involved in stocks, but they give you higher return. There's there is also the risk of holding money itself is also the inflation. Okay, so but when we talk about inflation, actually affects all assets at the same time. So that's why inflation really doesn't really should not affect things. Okay. Liquidity obviously is important, right? So as we just said, we want the liquidity. If the asset is less liquid, you want it to be to have higher return in order for you to be able to be willing to keep it, right? Now, what influences aggregate demand for money? So first of all, in the whole economy, right? In the whole economy, what influences the aggregate demand for money? The aggregate demand for money reflects the individual demand, right? So if the interest rate is high, then people have more incentive to hold the monetary asset because they get more return. So the interest rate is the opportunity cost of holding money. Interest rate is the opportunity cost of holding money. So it's like the price of holding money, right? So if it's high, then the cost of holding money is high, so you hold less, basically. Okay. The second factor that affects the aggregate demand for money is the general price level. Okay, the general price level. So if the general price level is high, then there's higher demand for money, right? Because you need for transaction, you need money for transaction. Okay, so interest rate, price, and then income. Right? Greater income implies that more goods and services have to be bought, so more transactions. So this has to be more transactions. Okay, these three things will affect the demand for money, aggregate demand for money. So first of all, let me ask you this question. When we say interest rate, do we mean nominal interest rate or real interest rate? Can anybody tell me? Do we mean nominal interest rate or real interest rate? When we say the opportunity cost of holding money. Either is fine, but they are different. They are not the same. No, that can only be one answer.
Shouldn't inflation affect cash and interest rate the same way?
No, well, just now I said inflation affects all assets in the same way, but now I'm talking about the demand for money, the opportunity cost of holding money. Okay, it's not the same as what I just said. So what is the opportunity cost of holding money? Is it a real interest rate or nominal interest rate? So when you compare holding money versus holding the interest-bearing bonds, so what's the cost that you give up? What is the opportunity cost that you give up by not holding bonds? Why is it real?
Because the real interest rate is like you lose purchasing power because of inflation. That's what the real.
Okay. So he said it's real. So any other answer?
I think it's the nominal.
Why? Why do you think it's nominal?
Because like I holding $100 and the bank is offering like 5% interest.
Right.
If I invest such a bond, I will get 105 regardless of the inflation rate. So I will always lose the 5.
You lose the right. Okay. So your nominal is what you give up, right? Nominal is you give up that $5, right? So that is the I think he's right. Opportunity, that's opportunity cost. We really talk about opportunity cost. You are really giving up that, right? But you actually trying to say, okay, real, so under what condition do we consider real interest rate then? What is the importance of real interest rate? Why do we care about real interest rate?
It accounts for inflation.
What's that?
It accounts for inflation.
Yeah, but so under what condition is real interest rate important? It's certainly not important when we consider, according to what he said, when we consider how much money we versus non-money we hold, it's really actually the nominal interest rate that matters, right? That's the trade-off, right? But real interest rate, so what is why is real interest rate important in decision making? Under what condition is it important? What kind of decision requires real interest rate?
Considering current consumption or future consumption.
Right. Okay, so therefore?
So therefore, real interest rate matters in how much money to save.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So when you think about how much money you want to save, that is the real interest rate, okay? It's the real interest rate. So these are two different decisions, two different types of decisions, okay? So roughly speaking, okay, when you decide how much money you want to save, you look at the real interest rate. But once you have decided that you want to save, then when you choose among the different assets, then you only need to worry about the nominal, because all assets are subject to the same inflation rate, right? Okay, see what I'm saying? Very good. So now we're step by step going to build up a money demand function, right? So here is one such money demand function. I say this is one. This is the demand function that we use in this course, okay? If you read some other books, they may give you a slightly different money demand function, but basically qualitatively it serves a similar purpose. So we just stick to this, okay? So okay, let's look at this money demand function. Just now we said there are three things that affect the money demand, right? One is the general price level, one is the income, one is the opportunity cost of holding money, which is the nominal interest rate. So they're all there. So you have the price level, P. Higher price means that you need more money for transaction. Higher real national income means that you have also more transactions. And then R is the opportunity cost of holding money, the nominal interest rate. And LRY, okay, is the aggregate demand of real monetary assets. Okay, so this is a concept that we have to explain. We have to kind of explain a little bit. Now, first of all, before we move further, I want to ask you. I want you to pay attention. Is this Y is the real national income. It's real. It's not nominal. Okay? It's the real income. It's the real GNP. It's not the nominal GNP. It's the real. Okay? So when there is higher real national income, it means that there are more goods and services that are produced. It's the output. It's the real output, right? So there's more real output, then more output being produced, and therefore there will be more transaction. Okay. So the reason why the real income is there is because of transaction. Really, it's because of the transaction. Okay. More income means more transaction. This all makes sense, right? When the price level is high, you need more income. Now this is a special functional form here. The price is put out there, and then there are two separate parts to the demand for money. one part is the price level, and then the other part is this L function. Okay, they are multiplicative. So this L function is what we call the aggregate demand of real monetary assets. So the way we write this money demand function with the P outside allow us to rewrite the function in this way, where the left-hand side is the aggregate demand of real purchasing power in liquid form is a function of the national income and the nominal interest rate. So this, we define this MD divided by P as the real purchasing power in liquid form. Real purchasing power in liquid form. So when MD over P is higher, it means that there is higher real purchasing power in liquid form. Okay, so the more it can buy. So it's just that, in a sense, it's a definition. Okay, so the purchasing power. Okay, so the this is the demand. So in other words, this is the demand. The economy actually demands this real purchasing power, this liquid real purchasing power. Okay, and this demand actually derives from the amount of transactions and also the opportunity cost of holding money. Okay, this real demand for real purchasing power. So the demand for real purchasing power in liquid form, it comes from the fact that there's transactions that people demand the purchasing power, and they actually and also it comes from the fact that people take into account the opportunity cost of holding this liquidity. Okay, right? So now, obviously, I haven't told you whether this is a positive or negative relationship, but let me ask you this. Do you think R will positively affect L or negatively affect L? Is this a positive? It's a negative. Because when R is larger, there is less demand for liquidity. Okay? So this is negative. How about this one? Is it positive or negative? Should be positive, right? More transaction. So you can therefore draw a curve like this. So the horizontal is the aggregate real money demand, aggregate real money demand, aggregate demand for real purchasing power in liquid form, right? And interest rate is, because interest rate is so important, so we're going to plot, we plot this L function as a function of R, okay? Okay, so what it says is that, just now we said, this is a negative relationship, so when interest rate is higher, there is less demand for liquidity. There's less demand for liquidity when interest rate is higher, because the opportunity cost is higher. So the trade-off, the center of this is the trade-off between liquidity and interest rate. Okay, with high interest rate, I would rather hold less liquidity. Why? Because I can always, if I have, what does it mean actually, hold less liquidity? So okay, so let's say I keep very little money in the bank, in my savings account. I put lots of money in the bond because interest rate is high. So what do I do if I really want to pay? Well, when I pay, I'll just sell my bond, okay, and then liquidate my bond and go for and do payment. Every time I liquidate my bond, it's time consuming. Maybe I have to do something. I have to talk to my broker or something, and then I'll have to go to the broker's office and and collect some money or whatever. Okay, so there's some sort of hassle in order to turn my bond into cash. However, I'm still willing to do it because the interest rate is so high. So I'll just keep less money in the bank. Okay, so that's the trade-off. All right. All right. Now here, then we can see that when the real income is higher, it will shift the curve to the right. That's actually very simple, right? So for the same, what it means is for the same interest rate, there's just more demand for liquidity because there's more transactions. Okay. Okay. Now, then we come to the money market, right? So the money market is as I said, where money is lent and borrowed in a sense, right? So so what happened is that in the equilibrium, money supply must be equal to money demand. Okay, so if it's not, then the opportunity cost of holding money will have to adjust. Okay, so it's pretty much like in other markets, right? So if supply is more than demand, right? If supply is more than demand, then the price will have to lower. In this case, the price is actually the opportunity cost of holding money. Okay, if demand is so in other words, in equilibrium, because MS equal to MD, right? Money supply is equal to money demand. So you basically have something like that. Okay. This is nothing more than just mathematical representation, but I think the graphical representation is actually more clear, more illustrative. So here you see, okay, this is money supply, which is a vertical line. Why? Because this is actually the money supply, real money supply. Okay, I have to be very careful with this. This is real money supply. So MS divided by P. MS, we assume that it is determined by the central bank. So the central bank can control MS. Okay, control the M1. The price level is sticky in the short run. Okay, it's given in a certain moment. In any moment, P is sticky. It doesn't change. Okay, it's given. Now, on the other hand, okay, why is this a vertical line? It's because, well, it doesn't change with the interest rate. Okay, it is controlled by the central bank and determined by the and also the price level at that time is unaffected by the interest rate. But however, the aggregate real money demand is inversely related to the interest rate. Okay, so now let's look at this equilibrium. Okay, so we're saying that this interest rate is not an equilibrium interest rate because it's too low. Okay, because under this interest rate, the real money demand is greater than real money supply. It's excess demand for money. The interest rate is too low. Why? Because at this interest rate, people actually want to hold lots of money. Interest rate is so low, they are not interested in buying that much bonds. They would rather hold liquidity. They rather have liquidity because interest rate is just too low. It's not worth the hassle to sort of liquidate your bonds so frequently. Right? It's too much hassle to always have to go and liquidate your bond. The transaction cost is not worth it. So they rather keep money in a liquid form. However, this demand is not met because the money supply is only like that. So as a result, the interest rate have to be bid up. So the question is, why? What is that is being what's the mechanism of this interest rate change? Can anybody tell me? So we know that, okay, this is not equilibrium because interest is too low and therefore the interest rate had to rise. But what is the mechanism that bids up this interest rate? Yeah.
As the demand is higher, more people want to borrow money, so they're going to bid, and the price is going to go up. As the only way of borrowing is paying higher interest rates because people want to borrow money as the demand is higher.
So you're saying that there is a somehow in the borrowing market, there is some sort of borrowing market, lending and borrowing market, where the interest rate will adjust, right? So this is what you're saying. So what is that market? What is that market? What market are we talking about here? That's the bond market. Okay, so we have been talking about this bond market, right? Well, this bond market is basically the interest-bearing asset. Okay, so we just, in this highly simplified world, people are the financial resource. People keep their financial resource in two forms: either money, either monetary, or non-monetary, which is bond. Okay, you either hold money or you hold bond. Okay, this is highly simplified world. Okay, you either hold money or you hold bond. Now the question is how much bond you want to hold, right? Okay, given that you have a fixed amount of, in this economy, right? There's a fixed amount of financial resource. So how do people divide between the two? Now in the bond market, okay. So in the bond market, you're right. So here we are really talking about what adjusts the interest rate is really what's happening in the bond market. In the bond market, there is actually, under this situation, there is actually an excess supply of bonds. Okay, this interest rate, there is excess supply of bonds. That means at this interest rate, there is some bonds that nobody buys. Okay, so what happened is that the interest rate has to rise to bid up the demand. Okay, so you have when the interest rate is higher, then people demand more bonds, right? So you have to, the interest has to rise to attract people to buy bonds. Okay, because the bond rate, the interest rate is too low, there's excess supply of bonds, and you have to, the interest rate has to bid up to attract more people to buy bonds. So only when the supply of bond is equal to the demand for bond, then the interest rate will be in equilibrium. And this interest rate, this equilibrium interest rate in the bond market is exactly the equilibrium interest rate in the money market. They are actually two sides of the same coin, because people are really allocating their financial resource into just these two types of assets. Okay, so in other words, what happened is that when there's excess supply or excess demand for money, there is excess supply of bonds. Okay, and therefore, in the bond market, the interest rate will have to rise. When the interest rate rises, people will demand less money. They will demand more bonds, and they demand less money. Okay, so eventually, you get to an equilibrium where the demand for money is exactly equal to the supply of money. Okay, so this interest rate is the equilibrium interest rate in the bond market. but it's also the equilibrium interest rate in the money market. Okay. Here, R2, for example, is not an equilibrium interest rate in the money market because the interest rate is too high. There is excess supply of money. There is this supply means that there is excess demand for bonds. There's excess demand for bonds. The demand for bond is actually greater than the supply of bonds. So more people want to hold bonds than the quantity supplied. So the interest rate will fall so that people want to hold less bonds. Okay, so that there would be an equilibrium in the bond market. So that's why. So let me try to illustrate this. Okay, we try to illustrate that why the demand for money is a residual after the demand for bond is satisfied. So this is actually what I already said. Suppose the supply of bonds, BS, is exogenously given. Okay, so BS is so this is you can think of this supply of bonds to be some demand for some funding. Okay, for demand for some borrowers. Okay, borrowers will issue bonds, right? They need to borrow money to do investment or something, right? So this is kind of like the bond reflects the demand for loanable funds. Okay, so the total amount of financial resource in the economy is given by MS plus BS. So people have some financial resource. They will either keep as bond or as money. So let BD be the aggregate demand for bonds. So, right, this is the demand for interest-bearing bearing assets. So therefore, the supply must be equal to demand. Okay, this has to be true. People just allocate their resource between the two kind of assets. As interest rate increases, people want to hold more bonds and less money, right? So they buy bonds. So as a result, BD increases and MD decreases. So BD, okay, so that's why I'm saying the demand for bonds and the demand for money, they are just two sides of the same coin. Okay, when interest rate increases, BD will increase, and as a result, MD will decrease. So when interest rate falls, people want to hold less bonds and more money, so they sell bonds, and so BD decreases and MD increases. So as a result, we have this. So BD. So in this. Okay. So another way to look at it is that MS minus MD is equal to BD minus BS. Therefore, the excess supply of money is equivalent to the excess demand for bonds. This is what I just said earlier, right? So when there's excess supply of money, it's actually the excess demand for bonds. Okay, is that clear? So here is this diagram here I want to show you. This is to hopefully, so the demand for bond, okay, is positively related to interest rate. If the interest rate is higher, then people want to buy more bonds. Okay. So that's why it is. So in this diagram, this is the origin. Okay. So here, this upward sloping curve is demand for bonds. The vertical axis is the interest rate. So where interest rate is higher, people want to hold more bonds, right? The supply of bonds we assume to be exogenously given, so that's this vertical. The supply of money is also exogenously given, is determined by the central bank. So BS plus MS is basically, this BS plus, and this is MS, and so this is BS plus MS. They are independent of the interest rate. So here, we're looking at just looking at the bond market. Really, here, these two curves. This curve is the demand for bonds. This is supply of bonds. So in the bond market, the equilibrium interest rate is here, right? So here, this interest rate is too low. Okay, meaning that meaning that there is actually excess supply of bonds. You see, this is at this interest rate, the bond supply is here, the bond demand is here. So there's excess supply of bonds, but at the same time, it also means there is excess demand for money. Because the MS, this is MS, remember, this is MS, but MD is actually here. So there's excess demand for money. So so I just try to illustrate that the excess supply of bonds is equivalent to excess demand for money. Okay. So in this equilibrium interest rate, where the bond market is in equilibrium, the supply of money is also equal to the demand for money. Okay. So there are two sides of the same coin. Okay. So the reason why I tell you this is because going back to this diagram, we want to explain why, what mechanism contribute to the change, what mechanism would drive the interest rate to go to the equilibrium level in the money market. That mechanism is what happened in the bond market, in the loanable funds market, basically. Okay? Is that clear? Okay. So, so the supply of bonds is equivalent to the demand for loanable funds. So another way to think about bonds is that the supply of bonds are supplied by companies that want to borrow money, and therefore they are really it's a demand for loanable funds. Right? The demand for bonds is equal to the supply for loanable funds. Okay. So the story remains the same if we make the additional assumption that BS decreases with R. So we could make in other words, we could make this BS curve. We could make this BS curve downward sloping, but it doesn't. The story will be the same. Okay. More realistically, the BS curve should be downward sloping, because people want to borrow more money when the interest rate is lower. Okay. They want to invest more when the interest rate is lower, so it should be a downward sloping BS curve. But the story will be just the same story, so I try not to make it too complicated. Okay, so yeah, so this is basically what I just said. I've already told you all these things here, right? People, when there's excess supply of money, there's an excess demand for interest-bearing asset. So the interest rate is too high, people with more money than they desire will buy bonds, will bid down the interest rates. Okay? So another way to say is this, the more supply of loanable funds bids down the price of the loanable funds. Okay? So these are all similar kind of argument. So now we have established why the interest rate, why the money market equilibrium how this is determined, right? Then we can do some comparative statics. So the effect of an increase in money supply on interest rate. So let's say you start from here. The interest rate, original interest rate is R1, but when the money supply increases to M2, then initially the market is not in equilibrium. Initially, the interest rate will be too high at R1. At R1, the money supply is greater than the money demand, so the interest rate will be too high. So the interest rate will have to fall. Interest rate have to fall. In other words, in the bond market, there is too much demand for bonds, so the interest rate have to fall to adjust. So in other words, an increase in the money supply will lower the interest rate. Increase in money supply will lower the interest rate. Now you have to notice that this P is unchanged. We're talking about the short run. We're talking about the short run where the price level is sticky. So an increase in money supply lowers the interest rate for a given price level, and a decrease in money supply raises the interest rate for a given price level. So so here we are really assuming that the central bank is controlling the amount of money supply. Interest rate, okay, a rise in real income, an increase in Y, real income, will actually increase the interest rate, right? Because why? Because there is more demand for money. At the original interest rate, there's more demand for money. There's more demand for transaction, and therefore more demand for money, and higher demand for real purchasing power in liquid form. Interest rate will be as a result, the original interest rate was too low. There's excess demand for money, or excess supply of bonds. So the bond in the bond market, the interest rate has to be bit up to attract people to buy bonds. Okay, so all right. So okay, so here we can sort of piece things together. So how is that going to affect the exchange rate? Okay, so suppose we have two countries here. One is the United States, and the other is Eurozone. You can think this is the right-hand side is the Eurozone or Euro area. So so we want to see how change in money supply in either of these two countries going to affect the exchange rate between the two currencies. So let's say suppose the U.S. Money supply changes. It's going to affect the U.S. money market by affecting the U.S. interest rate. Okay, and this will through what? Through the uncovered interest parity condition, it's going to affect the exchange rate. In the same way, if Euro area, the European Central Bank changes its money supply, it's going to affect the Euro interest rate, and through the uncovered interest parity condition, it's going to affect the dollar-Euro interest rate. So so diagrammatically, it looks like this. So now we have two diagrams. We just put together the two diagrams. So the top panel is the money supply. The top panel is the diagram that you have seen in the last chapter. You have the uncovered interest parity condition, where the equilibrium is 0.1 prime. The equilibrium exchange rate is E1. It's E1. The interest rate is R1. So the top panel is totally the diagram that you have seen in the last chapter. Now this bottom panel is the new diagram that we've seen today. This is the money market. So the top panel is the foreign exchange market, and the bottom panel is the money market. Okay, and in particular, this is the money market of the U.S. Okay, the U.S. money market. So here, okay, so this is the real money demand in the U.S. Because this is the interest rate. So it is downward sloping with respect to the interest rate, negative relative interest rate. This is the U.S. GNP, U.S. interest rate. This is the L function of the U.S. This is money supply in the U.S. divided by the general price level in the U.S. It's a real. This will be the real supply of money in the U.S. This money market equilibrium. So this diagram shows you the simultaneous equilibrium in the U.S. money market and the foreign exchange market. Okay. Now then we can actually do some comparative statics. So for example, if you say, okay, what happened when the U.S. money supply increases or something like that, we can do this kind of thought experiment. Okay, so in fact, this is what we can do. So suppose there is a one-time temporary increase in money supply in the U.S. One-time temporary increase. So what do we mean by temporary? By temporary, we mean that it only occurs in one period. Okay, so think about this discrete time. It's only increased by one period, and then in the next period, it's going to go back to the old level. Okay. So now it's a temporary increase, so it's not going to have any permanent effect. Okay. So so I can tell you the reason why we talk about temporary rather than permanent is there actually indeed a big difference whether the increase in money supply is temporary or permanent. Because if it's permanent, it's going to be more complicated. It's going to affect the expectation. It's going to affect the future, all the future price level is going to be affected. And as the price level is going to be affected, it's also going to have it's going to affect the future exchange rate E is going to be affected. When future exchange rate E is going to be affected, then the EE will also be affected. Okay, if it is permanent. Okay, so that's why to do the most simple comparative statics, we just look at the temporary. Where it would not affect the EE, it would not affect the P in the long run, and it would not affect the EE. So temporary one-time increase in U.S. money supply, how is it going to affect the exchange rate? So increase in real money supply in the U.S. In the short run, okay, because because this is a short run, so the price level in the U.S. is unchanged, but money supply increases from M1 U.S. to M2, so shift this down. When it shifts down, in the money market, it will lower the interest rate in the U.S. When it lowers the interest rate in the U.S., the uncovered interest parity condition says that the U.S. dollar is going to depreciate because people will sell dollar and buy euro because the interest rate is lower, right? So the the dollar rate of return on dollar deposit is lower than the dollar rate of return on euro deposit. Okay, so in the same way, yeah. So therefore it will lead to a depreciation of the dollar. So in other words, a temporary one-time increase in money supply in the U.S. is going to lead to a depreciation of the U.S. dollar. So it will lead to depreciation through the lower interest rate. Okay. So actually, this is actually quite consistent with what we observe in the real world. So whenever you see, from now on, you try to pay attention to the business section of the newspaper. Whenever you see that the U.S. raises interest rate, let's say suppose the Federal Reserve raise interest rate, it will actually lead to an appreciation of the dollar, oftentimes. When the U.S. cut interest rate, on the other hand, usually it leads to a depreciation of the dollar, usually. When the other central banks are not doing anything, of course, right? So if the other central banks are doing also follow suit, then it will be more complicated, right? So it's actually very it's quite consistent with what you see in the news. Okay, so the temporary increase in country's money supply causes interest to fall, raise return on domestic currency deposits fall, and domestic currency depreciate. Okay, that's the mechanism. Okay, a temporary decrease in the money supply, on the other hand, causes the interest rate to rise, and raise return on domestic currency deposits to rise, and domestic currency to depreciate. So this is what I said here. Okay, when the U.S. Increases interest rate, when the Federal Reserve increases the interest rate, it will lead to an appreciation of U.S. dollar usually. Okay, so so changes in foreign money supply. So just now we talk about changes in domestic money supply. Well, change in foreign money supply actually should be very easy to, right? It's just, foreign, you imagine that, the foreign is domestic, right? So it just, so the argument is is symmetrical. It's just a symmetrical argument. How would the change in the supply of euros affect the U.S. money market and foreign exchange market? And increased supply of euro causes a depreciation of euro, right? Because similar argument as before, increase in supply of euro will reduce the euro interest rate, and it leads to lower return to euro deposit compared with return to dollar deposit. So people will sell euro, buy dollar. The euro will depreciate, the dollar will appreciate in this case. Okay, a decrease in money supply of euro, just the opposite. It will increase the interest rate, increase euro interest rate, appreciation of the euro, depreciation of the dollar. Okay, so yeah. So here is just a diagram to show you how to analyze it. In this case, because we're using the same diagram, right? So therefore, when there's an increase in European money supply, it will lead to the this thing will increase. Decrease, sorry. This will decrease. Okay, so when the increase in European money supply, right? So of E increases, it will lead to a fall in the euro interest rate. Okay, so this fall in euro interest rate will then through the this curve, what is this curve? This is expected euro return. When R euro falls, it will shift the curve to the left. Okay. And so as a result, the U.S. dollar will appreciate. Remember, so the dollar will appreciate from E1 to E2, and so the euro actually depreciate. So remember, whenever the E falls, it means the dollar appreciate. Whenever the E falls, that means that the dollar appreciate. Okay. Okay. So look that the U.S. interest rate is not affected. The U.S. interest rate is not affected. The U.S. money market, there's nothing that happens. Nothing happens in the U.S. money market. So it only happens. What happened is that in the European money market, something happens. the European money market, the euro interest rate falls. Okay, but it also affects the foreign exchange market. Okay, so yeah, so this is just what I just said. Now, the next we will talk about long run versus short run. But I think because the time is running out, so maybe I'll postpone this till next time. Okay. So I think I can stop here. I'll stop here. So next time we'll talk about the short run and long run. Okay. So it's more interesting actually. When you talk about short and long run, it's a more interesting story. It affects expectation and all that. Okay. Any questions? All right. So I'll see you on Thursday. And remember, we have a graded homework here if you haven't picked up your graded homework. And here is also the sign-up sheet. If you have not signed up, please come do it.